Gypsy moths, an insect, could affect acorn production, and that could affect the number of mice and deer that you see, and that could affect the number of cases of Lyme disease that you see, and that timber rattlers could affect the number of mice you see and could affect the number of Lyme disease cases you see, and that overall deer population based on habitat could affect, and you start to see that just about every single thing is connected. Are there variables that we didn't even talk about or get to? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Tons of them. So what starts to become apparent is biologists who I used to run into at environmental educators councils every now and then, my favorite quote is, if you think you understand how complicated the natural world is, multiply by a factor of 10,000 and you might begin to approach it. Every little thing affects every other little thing. So John Muir, who was a naturalist and a photographer and a proponent of wilderness, said, when we tug on a single thing in nature, we find it attached to everything else. Everything affects some other thing. Tiny little bacteria in the soil. Fungus growing on tree bark affect whether or not a giant tree survives. So some of the bits and pieces that you were looking at, some of the bits and pieces that I saw in this research. Fragmented forests. This is a fragmented forest. Would you say that that could be an aerial view of a lot of parts of Columbiana County? Yeah, it looks like home. You got chunks of woods, you got little wood lots. Maybe the back end of the farm is still wooded. You got farm fields, you got roads, you got houses, you got little suburban developments that have popped up there. Those are fragmented forests. Lots of edges. Not a lot of deep forest. Even if you go up, basically the eastern U.S. really lacks this in a lot of places. If you go up into north central Pennsylvania, up into the Alleghenies, has anybody ever gone to the Alleghenies? Warren, PA, Kane, all those little towns up there. A lot of people know people with hunting camps up there. St. Mary's, places like that. Even up there, if you look at an aerial map, there's a lot of forest, but there are logging roads, forest roads, hunting camps, little developments. There's all kinds of stuff built in, and what that does is it breaks up the forest. Are there species that love this habitat? Name me a species that loves that fragmented forest system. Deer! So fragmented forests is connected to more deer. Mice don't really care. They're such generalists. We're going to talk more about the fact that mice and deer are both generalists. So fragmented forests do well for deer. Okay. Is there a species that this affects negatively? About a sixth of you had an article about an amazing herptile species. Herptiles are reptiles and amphibians. What's the only herptile up there? The timber rattlers. Timber rattlers need deep, uninterrupted, continuous forests. I don't understand all the reasons why, but they need really rich environments. They don't survive when we break up the forest. So fewer timber rattlers is also related to that. Well, what else is fewer timber rattlers related to? More mice, yeah. And more mice means more ticks. Probably means more diagnosed cases of Lyme disease. My color coding means nothing. What about the warmer world? Does that connect to any of this? Huh? More, yeah, abundance of acorns. I didn't even put that here. Abundance of acorns. Yeah, that can be a result of a changing climate. In some places, probably more acorns. In some places, fewer acorns. As areas that are on the far south end of those oak trees' range get hotter, they may not survive there anymore. Plant species that can survive in a given place are changing. Warmer world also definitely connects to black-legged ticks further north. Any other connections on here? And this, by the way, is a lovely timber rattler. Big fat beauty. That's the yellow color phase. There's another one that's a lot darker. And that's the more visible of the two color phases. Are there more things we could list on here? Yeah. There are a ton of them. The point being, it is more complicated than you can wrap your brain around. So, when you are thinking about your structured research, if you're in the structured research group for Fridays, all these things we're talking about are variables. When you're in the lab, you're controlling all those variables. You're really making sure that everything lines up and nothing is influencing something that you weren't aware of. When we walk out the door into the real world, into the world of nature, we can't control the variables and we can barely imagine them. It is so intensely complicated. Ecological research is fantastic in that way because there are so many factors that are so hard to understand and control and wrap your brain around. It's a magnificent, magnificent machine out there. It's not really a machine, but it's this complicated thing with billions of working parts. It's so cool. I have a bit of a bias. I'm really fond of this little planet. I think it's an awesome planet. As far as I recall, it's the only planet I've lived on. And it's amazing. The system that's in place out there is absolutely astounding. So, with that, here's what I want to do. I want to revisit one idea from last week, this science versus anecdote. So remember, anecdotes are personal, they're first-person narrative, sample size of 1, not always reliable. They have variables that we don't know about, but yet they're real things. So we talked about the idea of emerging science, and what we said is that if you get enough anecdotes, then that starts to be a point where you start to want to research. So we said the redheads and anesthesia for, 50 years, as long as we've been doing modern anesthesia. Anesthesiologists have been saying, look, redheads need more anesthesia. The drugs don't work the same way on them. Well, then somebody said, well, let's look at that. And it turns out, yeah, the gene that gives you red hair also changes the chemistry of your body in a way that you do need more anesthesia. Oh, holy cow, anecdotal evidence pointed towards research. So for many, many, many years, people have been saying, look, I got treated, but I'm still sick. Yeah, I did the antibiotics, I'm still sick. And modern medicine has been saying, yeah, but there's no clinical evidence that you still have an infection. This should have been treated. We don't have a scientific way to recognize what's happening to you. But when enough people say something, it starts to point towards a path for research. This is from 2015. Northeastern University, which I'm not sure, this may be Northeastern College of Medicine, which is in Rootstown, Ohio. Remember that the spirochetes that cause Lyme disease are pleomorphic. What does that mean? They have many shapes. Yeah, they can change their shape. What they're finding is that they're what are so-called persister cells. They persist, they hang on, and they can survive multiple doses of antibiotics. What's interesting is so that anecdotal evidence leads somebody to a direction in which to research. This research is pointing towards new treatments for Lyme. They're talking about pulsing antibiotics now because what happens is the persister cells appear to, when they're exposed to antibiotics, they kind of go dormant. And then when the antibiotics are removed, they wake up and start reproducing again. So what they're suggesting based on this research is you hit them with an antibiotic, you take time off, and then you hit them with another pulse of antibiotic before they've recovered enough to start reproducing. So you hit them with pulses of antibiotic, and that seems to do a better job clearing the bacteria than steady use of the antibiotics. But that comes out of people's anecdotal experiences. And science saying, no, we don't have an explanation for that. Well, maybe we do now. That's emerging science. Okay, here's the plan. Tomorrow, you're going to have a study guide. Remember, you guys are my guinea pigs in this little adventure. I hope you like alfalfa. I'll bring you alfalfa chews tomorrow if you like alfalfa. That was a joke, because guinea pigs like alfalfa. Never mind. I think I'm funny. That's all that matters. You're going to have a study guide tomorrow, and that study guide will be due at the end of the period. Wednesday, you will have a quiz over material from this unit. So then we're going to start into the sort of more traditional ecology material, a lot of which connects back to this unit, which is why I'm liking this.